Seraphine Ardenwolf had never once in her life done something without a reason. Every step she took was calculated. Every word she spoke was measured. She had grown up watching her father rule an entire kingdom of wolf packs with nothing but his voice and his will, and she had studied him the way a student studies a map, looking for every road, every border, every place where one wrong turn could cost everything. She was not soft. She had never been allowed to be. Her father, Alpha King Kalen, had made sure of that. From the time she was old enough to stand without wobbling, he had taught her that the world of packs was built on order. There were alphas, who led. There were betas, who served. And there were omegas, who existed at the bottom of everything, too weak to lead, too different to belong, tolerated only as long as they stayed quiet and stayed out of the way. Omega children who were born without a pack-bonded parent were to be taken to the borderlands. That was the law. It had always been the law. Seraphine had never questioned it, the same way she had never questioned the cold or the dark or the turning of seasons. She was 27 years old when that changed. It was the coldest night of the year, and she was riding the triple border, the stretch of land where 3 separate pack territories met and none of them claimed. She had ridden this border more times than she could count. There was never anything there except frost and silence and the occasional deer track frozen into the mud. That night, there was a boy. He was sitting in the hollow between 3 dead birch trees, very small, very still. He wore a shirt that was far too large for him, hanging off one shoulder, and he had no shoes. The ground was frozen solid. His feet should have been blue, and maybe they were. It was too dark to tell. He was not crying. He was not calling for anyone. He was simply sitting there, looking up at the sky with the calm expression of someone who had made peace with wherever he was, and was now just waiting to see what happened next. Seraphine stopped her horse. She sat there for a moment, looking down at him. He looked up at her. "I knew someone would come," he said. His voice was small but certain. "I just didn't know it would be a queen." She was not a queen. She was an heir, which was different, but something about the way he said it, without flattery, without fear, just as a simple statement of fact, the way a child names a color, kept her from correcting him. She dismounted. The shirt on his back had a word stamped across it in dark ink, Omega, pack brand ink, the kind that didn't wash out. Someone had marked this child before abandoning him. She looked at that word for a moment, and then she looked at his face, and then she picked him up, wrapped him in her patrol coat, and put him in front of her on the horse. She had a radio on her belt. She was supposed to report any Omega child found on Border Patrol to the registry. She picked it up. She pressed the call button. She told her second-in-command that she had found nothing on patrol tonight and was heading back early. She rode home. His name was Elian. He told her this on the ride, unprompted, in the same calm voice. He was 4 years old. He liked the color of the moon when it was big and yellow. He did not say anything about who had left him or why, and she did not ask. She had no idea how to take care of a child. Her private estate had staff, but involving them meant witnesses, and witnesses meant her father would know within the week. So she heated broth herself, which she did badly. Too much salt, not warm enough. And Elian ate it without complaint, and said it was good, which she suspected was not entirely true, but appreciated nonetheless. She gave him the guest room. He asked if he could leave the light on. She said yes without hesitating, which surprised her slightly, because she was not usually a person who said yes to things without thinking first. She stood outside his door for a long moment after, listening to the small sound of his breathing settling into sleep. Then she walked away and told herself this was temporary. She would figure out the right thing to do. She would think it through. She was still telling herself that 2 weeks later, when she brought her private physician, Dr. Fenn, to examine the boy. Dr. Fenn was old enough to have served her grandfather before her father, and he had kept the Ardenwolf family's private medical records for 30 years, without ever once speaking of them to anyone. She trusted him in the specific way you trust someone who has proven over decades that their silence is more valuable to them than any information they hold. He examined Elian thoroughly. He was quiet during the examination, which was normal. He was quiet in the hallway after, which was not. His hands were shaking. He told her, in a voice barely above a whisper, that Elian's blood carried something called a dual bloodline marker. It was the rarest genetic trait in all of pack history. It meant that Elian was not simply an Omega. He was the direct descendant of not one, but two Alpha bloodlines. Bloodlines that had been officially declared extinct over 60 years ago in an event known as the Great Culling, when a supposed disease wiped out several pack families in a single generation. Seraphine knew about the Great Culling the way everyone did, as history, as tragedy, as something that had happened before her time and been mourned and moved past. She had never once been given a reason to look at it any differently. Dr. Fenn gave her a key. The key opened a small metal box he had kept inside the wall of his clinic for 31 years. Inside the box was a folder. Inside the folder was the truth, laid out in medical records and internal pack council communications, and signed documents with names on them she recognized. Names that were carved into monuments and written into laws, and spoken with reverence at every pack convening she had ever attended. The Great Culling had not been a disease. It had been a decision. 60 years ago, a coalition of sitting Alpha Kings had learned of a very old prophecy, one that said, when a dual bloodline carrier walked among the packs again, no single Alpha could hold absolute power unchallenged. The Alphas had decided they did not like that prophecy, so they had made it impossible for it to come true. Every person carrying the dual bloodline marker, men, women, elders, children, had been quietly reclassified as Omega, stripped of their pack standing, branded, and sent to the borderlands, where they would live out their lives forgotten and eventually disappear. 214 people. Gone. Not from disease, from choice. Seraphine's grandfather had signed the authorization. She sat alone in her study, with the folder open on the desk in front of her. She did not move for a very long time. Outside, the wind was moving through the trees that lined the edge of her property, and the sound of it was the only thing in the room. She thought about the folder. She thought about Elian, asleep down the hall with his light on. She thought about a girl named Mira, who used to bring her wildflowers when she was 12, who came every morning for 2 years, and then one morning simply stopped coming. She had never asked why. She had been 12 and obedient, and had told herself it was not her business. She had regretted it for 15 years without ever saying so out loud. She picked up the folder and started making a plan. It took 3 weeks. She was careful. She used her royal access to pull 60 years of pack council records, cross-referencing them against what was in Dr. Fenn's folder. She contacted 2 people she trusted, Commander Lysa Vale, her oldest friend, and the head of the pack guard, and Roan of Ashvale, a beta heir from a neighboring pack who had always asked inconvenient questions at pack meetings and survived the social consequences of doing so. She told them everything. Lisa said she was in before Seraphine finished speaking. Roan called back 2 days later. He was in too. He also told her that he had been sitting on a similar document from his own pack's records for 2 years, waiting for someone else to find the same thread. They had both been carrying the same weight without knowing it. Before she did anything else, she went to see her father. She did not bring the folder. She sat across from him in his private meeting room, in the chair she had sat in for every serious conversation of her life, and she asked him directly, "Did you know about the Great Culling? What it actually was?" The pause before he answered told her everything before he said a single word. He told her it had been necessary. He told her stability was more important than any one bloodline. He told her she would understand when she was older, when she had the full weight of leadership on her shoulders. He called it a hard choice made by men who loved their packs, and he said it without apology, because in his mind, loving your pack and making brutal choices on its behalf were the same thing. Seraphine nodded. She thanked him for his time. She left. Every 5 years, the packs gathered at the neutral hall for the Grand Pack convening, a formal ceremony where the laws were reaffirmed and the hierarchy was restated. Seraphine had attended every one since she was 16. This year, she had formally requested the right to address the convening as her father's heir, which was granted without hesitation, because she had never once given anyone a reason not to trust her. She stood at the center of the hall. Her father sat at the head of the room, watching her with pride. Every alpha, every beta representative, every senior pack official in the region was seated and waiting. She placed the folder on the podium and began to speak. She presented the original documents. She presented the blood test results and the council communications, and the authorization orders. all of them authenticated by Dr. Fenn, in a statement read aloud by Commander Lysa. Roan of Ashvale rose from his seat and presented his own pack's corroborating records. She showed them Elian's blood results. She named every bloodline that had been deliberately destroyed. She read the names of the families. She named the men who had given the order, and she named every Alpha family, including her own, whose signature appeared on the documents. The hall did not erupt into noise. It went silent. Not the polite silence of ceremony, but the heavy, total silence of a room full of people whose understanding of the world had just shifted without warning beneath their feet. Several people stood and walked out, not in protest against Seraphine, but simply unable to sit beside certain men now that they knew what those men had done. One Alpha representative, a man she had known her whole life, looked at her with an expression she had never seen on him before. It took her a moment to recognize it as relief. Then she did the one thing no one in that room expected. She did not call for punishment. She did not name a single person to be removed or detained. She picked up a separate sheet of paper, a list she had prepared herself, and she read aloud the names of every one of the 214 people who had been taken from their packs and sent to the borderlands 60 years ago. All of them. First name, family name, the pack they had belonged to, the year they were displaced. It took 22 minutes. No one left. No one spoke. When she finished, she said, "Pack law will be reviewed. Every Omega registration from the last 60 years will be examined. We will find who survived. We will find their children, and we will begin again, correctly, this time." In the weeks that followed, the Pack Council was restructured. Her father stepped down, not under force, but under the undeniable weight of what the documents proved. The long process of reviewing 60 years of records began. It was slow and difficult, and contested in some places, but it began. Dr. Fenn retired. He left Seraphine a short note that said only, "I kept that box for the right person. I was right." She folded the note and kept it in her desk drawer. Elian started attending a real school. On his first morning, he asked Seraphine if she thought it would be a good day. She told him she didn't know. He thought about this for a moment and said that was okay, because they would find out together. She put him in the car, and they drove, and she did not say anything else, but something in her chest that had been held tight for a very long time felt, for the first time in as long as she could remember, like it had room to breathe. She thought, sometimes, about the distance between who she had been and who she was now. She was not a different person. She was still disciplined, still careful, still capable of the cold focus that had made her her father's heir. She had not become gentle overnight. She had not cured herself of the things her upbringing had built into her. But there was a difference, she had come to understand, between being strong and being indifferent. Her father had confused the two his entire life. She had spent 27 years watching him do it, and thinking it was wisdom. She knew better now. She had been raised to protect a throne. She had chosen, instead, to protect a child, and somehow, in ways that were still unfolding, still working themselves out across every pack in the region, that one choice had protected everyone. Elian still called her the Queen. She had stopped planning to correct him.